I'll share the slide anyways.
So let's start off with a prayer. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Over to you, Alpana.
Hari Om, everyone. I'll share my slides. So let's see if I do this. Is it visible? It's all right. Okay. So I'll also start with a short prayer. Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punah Ishvaro Guru Iti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyom Vadvyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha. Shankaram Shankaracharyam. Shankar in the form of Shankaracharya. Keshavam Badarayanam. Keshav, Vishnu. Vishnu in the form of Badarayan. Badarayan is another name for Vedvyas. And Badarayan was the avatar of Vishnu. And Shankaracharya was the avatar of Shankar. Why are these two important? Because Vedvyas, he did the categorization of the Ved, but he also wrote Brahma Sutra, and that's the basis for the Uttar Mimamsa, which is the one of the 6 darshans of the Hindu Astic philosophy. And Shankaracharya, he wrote the Bhashya. He wrote the Bhashya on Brahma Sutra. Otherwise, Brahma Sutra were in the form of aphorisms, and they're very cryptic. So they're very hard to decipher. So for our benefit, he's the one who wrote Bhashya, not only on Brahma Sutra, but also on 10 major Upanishads and Gita. So these two are very important when it comes to any of the Vedanta. So we pray to them punah punah, again and again. And then the second part was Ishvaro Guru Ratmeti, Ishwar, Guru, and the Self. These three, Murti Bhed Vibhagine, the differences or the division appears because of the Upadhi. So the Upadhi of Ishwar, Upadhi of Guru, and Upadhi of us. That is, the division is seeming. And Vyom Vad Vyapt, Vyom is Akash. So like Akash, he pervades everything. And who is he here referred to is Dakshinamurti. Dakshinamurti is a form of Shiva, which is also known as the first Guru, Adi Guru. In the Yog Sampradaya, he is known as Adi Yogi. And in Nath Sampradaya, he is known as Adi Nath. So we pray to him. So it's a prayer mainly to, to the Gurus, because of whom this knowledge has been made available to us. Okay. So since Rajesh said that it is a summary of Vichar Sagar, though I've just taken a couple of topics, but I thought I'll introduce the text. It is a beautiful and fascinating text. So I'll start with the Mangalacharan. So all the texts that we find in the Indian scriptures, they start with a Mangalacharan. So the Mangalacharan for this particular text is Sukham Nityam Swaprakasham Vyapakam Nama Rupayoho Adhishtanam Buddhya Bodhyam Buddher Drigyattu Nirmalam Aparam Sarva Vedanta Vedyam Pratyak Param Mahaha Tadevaham Namattonyat Iti Me Nishchitamatihi. So the last line is Tat eva aham, that alone I am. Namattonyat, and that is not different from me. Iti me nishchita mati. This is my final declaration. This is my final conclusion in my intellect, in my understanding. And what is that? And that is described in the first 3 lines. It is Sukham, bliss, Nityam, ever present, Swaprakasham, it is self-effulgent, Nama Rupayoha Adhishtanam, it is the support for all the names and the forms. Like we see the screen is the support for all that's happening in the movie. Buddhya bodhyam, buddhi abodhyam. It is not a matter of understanding of the intellect. Buddher drik. In fact, it is the illuminer of the buddhi. It is the observer of the buddhi. It is because of which the buddhi understands things. Tu nirmalam. It is pure. Pure, it is not contaminated by the Maya and its products. So it is not good, bad, ugly, but it is not impacted by any of the Maya and its products. Aparam. Aparam, it is boundaryless, and there is nothing which is bigger, larger than it. Sarva Vedanta Vedyam. It is what is taught by all the Vedantas. It's the essence of the Vedanta, which itself is the essence of all the teachings of the Vedas. And what is that? Pratyak. Pratyak is the essence of our own self, which is nearest to us. And Param Maha, it is, what is the Maha? Is the supreme light, or the essence of the supreme. So they are one. That is the essence of the teachings of all the Vedas, and that I am. So it's a beautiful Mangalacharan, and the reason I wanted to share it was because the text itself explains there are 3 types of Mangalacharan. One is Namaskaru, where you pray to God. You pray to God for it's more of Namaskar Roop is either you do the stuti, in appreciation you say something, or you invoke them. And then the second one is Ashirvad Roop, where you get the blessings. And then this one is actually Vastu Nirdesh Roop. Nirdesh is indicating. And Vastu, what is Vastu? Vastu, one that is always there, which is always sthit. That is known as Vastu. And there's only one thing, which is Brahman. And hence, this is actually a Vastu Nirdesh Roop Mangalacharan, which is used in this particular text. So what is Vichar Sagar? Sagar is ocean, Vichar is thoughts. It is a collection of thoughts, which are concepts, which you can use to clarify your doubts, and you can meditate upon, contemplate upon, to know that truth. So it is a conglomeration of all the thoughts which are required for Brahma Gyan. And like the ocean has got waves, this has 7 chapters, which are known as Tarang. And the first chapter actually describes the Mangalacharan itself. And it goes into, it's very interesting, just to give a sense of what kind of text it is. So it starts with what is a definition. Definition is it's a precise description which doesn't have 3 dosh. And what are those dosh? Ati Vyapti, Avyapti, and Asambhavna. So Ati Vyapti is that the definition should not go beyond what you're trying to describe. So for example, if you want to say if you want to describe human beings, and you say all living beings that walk on 2 feet are humans, but then that also includes birds who walk on 2 legs. So this is Ati Vyapti. You're including more than what you're trying to describe. Then Avyapti is you're including less than what you want to describe. So for example is all living beings who are married are humans. So that's only a subset of it. It doesn't describe the unmarried people as humans. And then asambhavna is if you say all humans who have horns, all living beings who have horns are humans. So then, I mean, that's not possible. So that's the third dosh. So the definition that's given of Brahman in the Mangalacharan is actually the most precise, even though it may appear that it has so many words that are used to describe Brahman, but none of them are actually even punarokti. They're not describing the same aspect of Brahman again. So the first chapter actually goes that, the Purva Pakshi is the one who keeps raising the objections, and he keeps saying, why are you using this? Why are you using this and that? And then the first two chapters actually also go into Anubandha Chatushtay. So any text which is written, it starts with Anubandha Chatushtay. It is to describe the text. So the first is Adhikari. So who's the target audience? And then second is Prayojan. So Prayojan is what's the benefit of that text. And then Vishay is what is the unique topic in that particular text. And then the last is the Sambandh. And then the two chapters actually focus on, because it says, okay, Adhikari is the one who has Sadhan Chatushtay. So the Purva Pakshi will say it's not even possible to have such an Adhikari. So your text is useless. Then it says the Prayojan is Moksha. They'll say moksha is also not possible. And then there are arguments against it. So there are two full chapters on that, just describing what the Mangalacharan is and just the Anubandha Chatushtaya. Then the third chapter talks about how should one approach Guru. So what are the lakshan of, what are the characteristics of a good Guru, a good Shishya, and how should one approach? And it's the shortest chapter of a few pages only. And then the real Vedanta starts, and it's in 3 chapters. So it's in the form of a dialogue. So there was a king called Shubh Santati, so whose kids were, Shubh is auspicious, or how a kid should be. So he had 3 sons, and when they were old enough and able enough to take care of the kingdom, this king calls them and says, "Ki tomorrow I will make you the king. I have thought about, how to fairly divide the kingdom and give one to each one of you, and then I'll go into the forest." So they ask, "Why are you going to the forest?" And he says, "I've been there, done that, done everything. I still feel there's something missing. So I want to go and, realize self. I've heard about it and I want to understand it all." So that night, the 3 sons, they get together and they say, "He's leaving us with the kingdom and he's going away. Why should we get to it?" So the 3 sons actually just run away, and they go far away, and finally they come across an ashram. So the next 3, so these 3 chapters are of the 3 sons. So the first son is Tattva Drishti, the second son is Adrishti, and third son is Tarka Drishti. So the names are chosen very appropriately. That Tattva Drishti is the Uttam Adhikari, who's almost there, who knows what it is, because in those days everybody was taught the basics of all the Vedanta, etc. So he's the Uttam Drishti. He's the first one. The second one is Madhyam Adhikari. So the first one believes in Shastras, and he had only a couple of doubts. But the second one, even though he believed in the Shastras, but he was unable to accept it. So then he said, "What should I do?" So it is more in the form of what a person with who's a middle adhikari should do. And then the third chapter, even though he's called as the Mand Adhikari, is the most intelligent one. But because he is intelligent, he is Tarka Drishti, so he doesn't just accept what's written in the Shastras, and hence he goes through the logic. That's the longest chapter. And it also includes what different philosophies say. So it also includes that part of it. And then the last chapter, 7th chapter, is more on Jivan mukti and videha mukti, which is the result of getting moksha. So this is what the book is. Originally, Hindi version was written, and because it's one of the books which contains all the concepts that you will come across ever in Vedanta. So there's a Swami in the south, Swami Vasudev Brahmendra Saraswati. He translated it from Hindi into Sanskrit so that the people from south could read it. And this text is one of the favorite texts of Swami P. And he has 450 odd lectures on it. So those are the two versions. And an attempt has been made to translate it into English also. And the English version is known as the Metaphysics of Upanishads. So it's a beautiful text. It is a bit technical, and at a number of times it feels like it's hair splitting, but eventually it all comes together. And some of those doubts, it's not that we even think about those doubts, but once those doubts are clarified, it makes the understanding much clearer. Okay, so let's get into the this thing today. So this was the photo I had taken at Varanasi of the sunrise. The sun sits well just above Gyan, and it also includes the reflection. Those are the two most important parts of Vedanta, the original consciousness and the reflected consciousness. So I chose this. This was supposed to be the first slide, but I just added that because I wanted to give the context of Vichar Sagar to start it. So what is it that we all want? So we keep oscillating between grief and joy. So all our efforts are towards removing all the sorrows all the time. And we want to have happiness, which is niratishay. Niratishay is, if you do gradation of happiness, there's nothing which is more than the happiness that we want. And that's the infinite bliss that we want to achieve. And it's only possible through Brahma Gyan. And what is Brahma Gyan? If we have to say in one sentence, it is Brahma Satyam, Jagan Mithya, Jivo Brahmaiva, Naparaha. So there are three parts to it. Brahma Satyam. So we saw just now, the whole definition of Brahm. And it's easier to think that there is something like Brahma, which is truth. And it has these, attributes or characteristics that were described in that Mangalacharan. Then the last part is Jivo Brahmaiva Naparaha, which means that the Brahma that we are talking about is not different from I. So that also, I think, a lot of texts say about it, but to understand that there's Jeev and Brahm are not different, we went through that Tattvamasi part in a number of texts, that whatever is different, you negate that, and then what is remaining is same. But intellectually, if you think about it, if you say a pen and a phone, whatever are the differences, if you remove them, whatever is left is same. So even though it's supposed to be a very profound statement that Tattvamasi, but we are negating the differences, then whatever is left is same. So in that way, you can match any two things. Whatever are the differences, you remove them. That's the intellectual argument one can give. Though we do understand whatever is negated is mithya, and hence it can be negated, and something is left. Because in case two things are completely different and you negate everything, then nothing is left. So shunya, yes, the shunya of one is same as the shunya of two, but that's not the point here. But I'm saying that intellectually we still think, okay, whatever are the differences, you remove them, and then there is the ekta of Jeev and Brahm. But the middle part is that Jagan Mithya, which most of us struggle with. And even the Uttam Adhikari, that was the first student, was struggling to get, why is Jagat Mithya? Yeah, you keep saying that, but I can feel the sorrow. I can feel the pain. It impacts me. How do I negate it? And hence this whole, the topic that I chose is most relevant to understand Jagan Mithya part.
Alpana?
Yeah.
If you can please move your cursor, it's blocking some of the text.
Okay.
Thank you.
So let's start with what is Gyan. So when we say what is Brahm, we also use the phrase Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. So Gyan is actually the all-pervading consciousness. But we interchangeably use it as one particular instance of that as the knowledge. So in knowledge, Gyan is involved because what is consciousness? One that knows itself and it knows different from itself too. So knowledge is just one instance of that, but we interchangeably use Gyan with the knowledge. And what is knowledge? Knowledge is a thought, and thought in Hindi is known as vritti. Vritti is modification of our mind, because the thoughts occur in mind. Mind is antahakaran, and it's modification. So when we say, I know a pen, in my mind, there is a pen vritti, there's a pen thought. And because of that pen thought, I have knowledge of that. Now this knowledge or this Gyan is possible in two ways. One is direct Gyan, the other is indirect Gyan. So I'm sure you all would have heard Vivid Bharati or Ceylon when we were growing up. There was a place which often was quoted again and again, Jhumari Talaya, that the requests are coming from Jhumari Talaya. So I think we all have heard about it. So we have indirect knowledge of that place, but at least I haven't gone. So unless you go there and you really see it, so when you go experience it, see it, that is direct Gyan. But when you hear about it or you Google it, the information that you get from authoritative sources, sources that you believe in, that is known as indirect knowledge. Now, direct knowledge, the definition of it is that whatever is the object of knowledge and that thought, it should come together. So when you visit Jhumari Talaya, the object of knowledge, which place, and you will be there, hence you will be seeing it. So the thoughts that are going in your mind, they are in direct contact, and hence it is known as direct Gyan. Now, direct knowledge is possible through three things. One is through sensory, through the sense organs. So when you see, okay, what you see, you may not be seeing the right thing, but the knowledge is direct. Even when you see a snake in a rope, you have knowledge of snake through your eyes. So it is a direct knowledge. The second is words generated knowledge. Now, words generated knowledge, how is it different from the sense organ of sound? So we hear sound. What's the difference between the two? Why is it given separately? Because when the Shotrindriya, the sense of hearing, when they receive the sound, the knowledge we get is whether the sound is loud or feeble, whether the sound is gone, whether the sound is coming again and again. But when we have knowledge of the language, and if we hear words, we interpret it, and the knowledge we get is different from what just the sense organ of hearing would give. So that's the second type. Now, the words can either give direct knowledge or indirect knowledge. Same example, Jhumari Talaya, we had heard it, or we Google it, so we read those words, so we get the indirect knowledge. But the knowledge, like in the example of that 10th man story, Tvam Dasham Asi, you are the 10th. That's a direct knowledge. And how did we get that knowledge? We got it from the word. We did not get it from any of the sense organs. Hence, this word generated knowledge is taken as a separate one. And then the third one is Sakshi Pratyaksh Gyan. We'll go a little bit detail into that. But Sakshi Gyan is the one where, again, no sense organs are involved. So it's like emotions. So how do we know the emotions? Emotions we directly know. There's no inward eye that goes in and looks at our, what the emotions are. So that's an example, but it's a direct experience. So it is part of the direct knowledge. Now for Gyan, there are three things that happen. So one is the knower of knowledge. The second is the object of knowledge. And third is the instrument through which we get that knowledge. So Pramata is the knower. It is also known as the ashraya of knowledge, where the knowledge is located. So that locus, that location, that ashraya is the Pramata, the one who knows. Prameya is the object of knowledge. So if you have a knowledge about the pen becomes the Prameya. And then if you look through eyes become the Praman. So those are the instrument of knowledge. Now, just as Gyan requires a Pramata and a Prameya, so there has to be an ashraya of the knowledge, the locus of the knowledge, that means, and the object of knowledge. Similarly, a Gyan also requires both of these things. We tend to think that knowledge only needs these things, but a Gyan also. So you're ignorant about an object and you are ignorant. So you are the ashraya of a Gyan also, and there's an object of ignorance. So I don't know the precedent. In this, ashraya is I and precedent is the Vishay. Moving on. So this is a little bit more detail how the direct sensory knowledge appears. So if you take any object, it actually has two veils on it. So one is, I don't know the object and I don't experience the object. And you'll realize why these two things are required. So an example could be, you go into a dark cave and you have a torchlight with you. You see there's a trunk there and you want to see what's inside the trunk. Now, but the trunk has a lock. So you look around, you find a rock and you try to break that lock. In the meantime, your torch runs out of the battery. So there's absolute darkness inside there. But because you know the lock and you had that rock, you break it open. When you break it open and you can open the chest or the trunk, you can't see what is inside. So there are two avaran. So one is which is blocking the existence of the object, and the second one is which is blocking the knowledge or the experience of the object. So what happens when you see a pen? We talked about vritti. So vritti is the modification of mind. So the antahakaran vritti, that is the modification of the mind. Here I'm using mind for the entire antahakaran. So modification of the mind goes out from the eyes and envelopes this pen. So it removes it shows that there is a pen. Now, the antahakaran vritti, the modification of the mind itself is insentient. So mind itself is not able to reveal what is there because the object is also insentient. But because it is the modification of mind, and mind is Satogun Pradhan, so the consciousness can reflect in it and it reveals the object. So there are two processes that happen. One is vritti vyapti. Vyapti is pervasion, enveloping. So through vritti vyapti, the first avran is removed and through Phalavyapti, which is the reflected consciousness, it will reveal the object. So the takeaway just from here is objects, if they're insentient, they cannot reveal themselves. And hence we need these two processes. But if suppose when you open that trunk, there were those money which are which have their own light. So even though our torchlight was not there, but the moment you open the trunk, you'll be able to see it because it is Swaprakash, right? But if there is no light there, you'll not be able to see it. Hence, you need an external light. Okay, so that's the takeaway from this. Even though I think you may feel there are too many words on it, the only takeaway is that if it's an insentient object, it will need two processes. One is to break the outer covering, the outer veiling, which is just obstructing that even there is an object you don't see. And then the second one is something should illuminate, and that's the Chidabhas, or the light in our example. Yeah. Then a little bit on the Sakshi Gyan. So we looked at two things. Now, if in the mind there is an emotion, then mind itself has the reflected consciousness, which is illuminating the mind. So only vritti vyapti is needed. So the modification of mind. Here mind becomes both the object of knowledge and instrument of knowledge. Yeah, and it is Nitya Prakash. So the difference between Nitya Prakash and Swaprakash is it doesn't have its own light because mind is insentient, but it needs some external light, which is the consciousness. And because mind is clean and is able to reflect, it is like the mirror. It is always illuminated. Whenever there is a mind, whatever is inside will always be illuminated, but we need to have vritti. So sometimes we may be very happy and going around doing our chores. That's why they say, enjoy the moment, just sit back and even think that you're happy. So you need that vritti, which is focusing on how the mind is. So from this slide, it's just that Sakshi Gyan doesn't need Phalavyapti. It doesn't need a separate illuminer because it's straight away illumined by the consciousness directly by reflecting on it directly. Yeah. So that's the thing you need to take away from this particular slide. Now let's move on to a Gyan. Now we said that Gyan needs locus. A Gyan also needs locus. So we need the ashraya. Now, the locus can only be something which is sentient. Only a sentient person can say, I have a knowledge or I am ignorant. My hand cannot say, I don't know. The pen cannot say, I don't know. Or pen cannot say, I know. So that's our first principle. Now, the second principle is, when we say, I don't know any particular thing, we usually say, I'm ignorant of the chair. But what it is trying to say is, you're actually not ignorant of the chair, but you're ignorant of the consciousness which is enveloped by the chair. And why is it that? Because chair itself is a projection. We'll see that. And hence, the ignorance is always of the underlying consciousness. So that's one principle. There's a slide at the end which also explains this a little bit in the appendix if you want to go through it. But it's the way to look at it is, because everything is a projection, what it is projected upon, it's always ignorance of that. And the ignorance has two properties. It's avaran and vikshep, which is it veils what the underlying consciousness is, and vikshep is it projects something which is not. Okay, so these are the two main parts of this one. The last part just says that, so if you, through inquiry, if you can remove the ignorance, the whole world will disappear, because world has come out of the projection from the ignorance. Like when you try to analyze the darkness with light, the darkness disappears. Yeah. Okay. Now here what we are interested in is that we are ignorant about our own self. So who's ignorant? That's a question often asked. And usually we say the ahankar, the I, the ahankar, which is part of the antahkaran, is ignorant. But if you notice that the Atma itself is covered with agyan to begin with, before manifestation, the Mula Vidya, the Maya that we talk about, is the only thing which exists when the creation is not there. It's only when the creation comes into existence, ahankar comes in. So the agyan is the locus of agyan is the consciousness, and agyan appears before ahankar. Ahankar meaning the antahkaran part, which identifies with this body. So the antahkaran is an effect, and agyan is actually the cause. So cause cannot reside in the effect. Okay. So that's why we say it is self-ignorance, because the object of ignorance is consciousness, and the locus of ignorance is also consciousness. It's the Atma which is covered by the ignorance. So the ignorance is veiling the Atma. So Atma is the object of ignorance. And where is this agyan? It also resides in that same consciousness. So if you think of deep sleep, the ahankar is resolved. And yet we say, I don't know. Because so the agyan is still there. Okay, so this is just trying to explain that it's a self-ignorance. Yeah. Okay, so why are we doing all of this is that what is the result of agyan? Result of agyan is illusion. It's the adhyas. This is the projection. So experience does not prove existence of something. And that's what I was trying to explain when I said, when you have that direct knowledge, doesn't mean the knowledge is right, but it is just the direct knowledge that you're directly experiencing it. But what you're directly experiencing it doesn't prove that that thing exists. And hence that example that you see a snake in the rope, it is a direct knowledge, but the snake doesn't exist. So the knowledge may be wrong, but it is direct. So experiencing something, first of all, doesn't prove that it exists. So that's the first principle. Then, so when I was explaining just a couple of terms, so the ignorance of Atma is known as Mula Vidya or Maya, that we speak about in, say, Tattva Bodh, etc. That's the ignorance which has veiled Atma. So, and when it veils the Atma, it projects this entire world. But if you take the objects of these worlds, the objects of this world, their ignorance is known as Tula Vidya. So it is just for the explanation purpose, if we have these two terms. So ignorance of Atma and ignorance of Anatma. These are the two things, and these are useful in explaining the three levels of reality. So because we don't know Atma, we don't know Brahm, that Mula Vidya, which is the Maya, it projects this entire world. And within that world, if we take an object, say a rope, and we don't have full knowledge of it, so the ignorance of rope, which is an object, right? So ignorance of rope is known as Stula Vidya. That can project illusion, which we call as the Pratibhasik Satta. So like the dream example, we project it. And who are we? We in the sense of this body and mind, we are ourselves are the projection of the Mula Vidya, the Maya. Okay. Now, so yeah, the two things that the Mula Vidya, which is also known as the macro avidya, the cosmic avidya, is the one which projects the world, which is known as transactional world, empirical world, vyavharik world. It also projects the knowledge of it. And why is it important to understand this? That it has projected the objects, but it has also projected the mind which can know it. And hence you can say guna guneshu vartante, because the object is also projected, the experience of that object. So the instrument to experience it and the experience is also projected. So to say that Maya projected an individual and then it projected everything for that individual to experience. So both sides are projected. Similarly, in the illusionary project, there is a snake which is projected and the knowledge of snake is also projected. Yeah. So this one goes into a little bit more detail of how this projection happens. So first, let's take example of snake and rope. So you're trying to see the rope. The modification of mind goes out from the eyes and envelops the snake. The rope. So if it's absolute pitch dark, you'll not be able to see any part of the rope. So then there'll be no illusion. If you have full knowledge of the rope, then also there'll be no illusion. Illusion occurs only when, as I said, each object is also covered by Tula Vidya, only when the Antahakaran Vritti cannot break this Tula Vidya, cannot remove this Tula Vidya, do we see the illusion. If we are able to see it, there will be no illusion. So similarly, if we are able to experience Brahman and there is no Mula Vidya, then there will be no projection either. Now, so if Tula Vidya is completely removed, but Mula Vidya is not removed. Mula Vidya is the one which is covering the Atma. So the projection, which is this transactional world, is still visible. So if Tula Vidya is completely removed, we'll see the projection of the Mula Vidya, which is the rope. But if the Tula Vidya is not completely removed, but our Antahakaran Vritti has gone. Now, Antahakaran also has the memory, the sanskar, because it has Chit part also. Antahakaran has those 4 components. So because of those, if Tula Vidya is not fully resolved, it uses those sanskar to project what our sanskar are. And that's the reason everybody who's seeing it sees it differently. Because it is the result of each individual Antahakaran. Whereas when you see the world, it doesn't involve our Antahakaran. It is the projection from Maya. And that's why we all see everything. If we are seeing it correctly, we see the same thing. There's no illusion part of it. Yeah. Then, so adhyas is the superimposition. Now, when there is a superimposition, there are 2 things. So one was the snake and the knowledge of the snake. Now, both the things are important to have. Now, the object is created from the tamas part of that Tula Vidya, and the knowledge is created from the sattva part of avidya. And both snake and snake experiences are superimposed on the rope enveloping the consciousness. Have I lost everyone?
No, we're still there, listening. Go ahead.
Okay. So here, the point to note here is that the superimposition happens on the consciousness. It doesn't happen on the rope, because rope itself is imagined. So what is imagined cannot be the support of the further illusion. Okay. Now, what does the jnanam do? So in deep sleep, there's pure ignorance because there's no partial knowledge. So little knowledge is dangerous. If there is pure ignorance, it is bliss. Because in the deep sleep, we don't feel sansar because there is no projection that we feel. There is no mind and there are no objects either. So there is no sansar and there is no mind either. Now, it's only in the waking and the dream state where we have this adhyas. So what is the cause of the problem? The cause of the problem is this Bhranti Gyan, which is that adhyas, that arthadhyas plus jnanadhyas. That is the problem. And Gyan will destroy the agyan. Now, so what are different terms that I've been using? One is Gyan. You don't know the Gyan, or it is covered by a Gyan. Because of agyan, because of that ignorance, we have projection, which is adhyas. So, okay, these are three things. Okay, gyan, agyan, and adhyas. Adhyas is superimposition or illusion, whatever you want to call it. Okay. So now what happens if you have gyan? Now this adhyas is happening because of agyan. Agyan is the cause of adhyas, because agyan is covering the gyan. Now, if you remove the central part from gyan, the adhyas will go away as well. Because agyan is the cause of adhyas. So this entire world that we see is just the projection of that Mula Vidya, which can only be removed by removing the agyan or that Mula Vidya. And that is done through Jnanam only. So, and how does that Jnana happens is just described here a little bit, that the mind has to take a Brahmakar Vritti, because in every knowledge, the Vritti is really required. The Vritti Jnana is definitely required. You may not require Phala Vyapti because Brahman is Swaprakash, but you will still, the mind has to take the form of that Brahman. Then it is self-illumining and we'll know it. And it happens through Shabda Praman. Shabda Praman is Tattvamasi, when the Guru says that. Yeah. So what are the 7 stages? Hopefully this will make, where we were in all of this. So avidya, I don't know Brahm. You have not even heard about it. That's the first stage, which is probably pure ignorance is bliss. You didn't even know about it. Then in the second, we hear about Brahm, but we can't, we don't believe in it. So we say there is no Brahm, even though I've heard about it and I don't experience it. Then the third is, I am not Brahm and I am a miserable jeev, because I can see all the vikshep. Vikshep is the projection which we are going through. So we become the karta and the bhokta. And hence we have suffering, grief, and the whole sansar. And then we have paroksh gyan. There is Brahm. When we try to read about it, I think we get convinced from some logic, but we have not yet, we feel we haven't experienced it. Then aparoksh gyan happens, which is generated by the Mahavakya, Tattvamasi, Aham Brahmasmi, any of those. Now, aparoksha gyan will remove 1, which is avidya, 2.1, which is avaran, 2.2, the both type of avaran. We did, there were 2 avaran, that there is no object and there is no experienced object. There's no experience of the object. So both of them are removed. And 3.1, which is vikshepa, is removed because we have gyan. So this whole adhyas goes away. But we still have bhranti, shok, and sansar. So bhranti, shok, bhranti, nash, it goes away in the 6th stage. Because when you have this, you say, I never had a janma. Because see, if it is all adhyas, that means there was no birth. If there was no birth, then there's no question of future janma as well. So then there is no shok, there is no bhranti. And then in the last one is the anand prapti, when the akhandakar vritti happens, and then you experience that your own self, which is Satchidanand. So those are the 7 stages of spiritual journey. And I wanted to end with the story. How sometimes pratyaksh gyan may not give direct knowledge. Because when we were doing about the knowledge, we said pratyaksh gyan always gives direct knowledge. It's the Shabd Gyan which sometimes give direct or sometimes indirect. So there's a little story on it. There was a king, and his prime minister's name was Bharchu. The story comes in few Upanishads and Vedic texts, and hence I'll stick to the same names. So this prime minister was very able, and the king really liked him. But as politics would be, the other guys then started getting jealous of him, hating him. So they make a plan that, they just said that there is a lot of disturbance going on in one region, and there's a lot of chaos there. So then the king asked them, okay, you go and fix it. They say, oh, you always trust Bharchu. Now, when such a situation is there, why are you not sending Bharchu? So the Bharchu himself says, okay, I'll go and fix it. So the king is happy, and Bharchu goes there. Now, these guys, they all obviously had a plan. So when he goes there, they tell the king that Bharchu has died. Whereas Bharchu was actually very capable. So he fixes the situation, and he defeats, and he comes to know that these are the guys who had made that plan. So when he was actually on his way back, these guys then realized, oh my God, Bharchu is still alive and he's coming back, and we all will be dead because he'll tell the king what has happened. So they create another story, and they tell the king that Bharchu has died and he's become a very, very dangerous pret. And, whoever sees him, he eats them. And, be very, very careful. And Bharchu, on the other side, he was actually a very able man and very learned. He also realized, this is a great option. As it is, he heard the story that, all the other ministers have told the king. So there's no point going back. So he becomes like a sannyasi and starts living, and that, I have accomplished what I wanted to. Let me find this truth. So he was in jungle. So the long story short, one day the king goes into the jungle for hunting, and he sees Bharchu there, and he was actually quite sad for losing him. But even though he saw Bharchu, because people had told him that Bharchu has died and he's become a pret and he will eat whoever he comes across, he runs away from far away itself in spite of seeing. So I think the story is just to explain that even though Brahman, we see the Samanya Ansh everywhere, which is the existence is there everywhere. That we experience the Chaitanta, the consciousness, and yet we don't acknowledge it, because through births, it has been told to us that this body and mind is real, this world is real, and hence it's very difficult that off. So I thought this was a story which a lot of texts have. So I'll end it here. But if you want to go through it, I had just included what are the means of knowledge. There are 6 means of knowledge. Upadhi versus Visheshan we didn't cover, but we can cover it some other time. And the theory of error, we only covered one where I said Arthadhyas and Jnanadhyas, but it actually goes through 6 different ones. And this is the one which is most accepted. But there are 5 other khyati, why the snake appears in the rope. And they're interesting reads. But obviously the Anirvachaniya Khyati, which is the one we did, has refuted all the remaining ones. So just, if you're interested in reading about it. And then why rope can't be the Adhishtan, why, I just said that, because it itself is imagined, so it cannot be the support. And then the 3 words, what's the difference between Ashray, Adhishtan, and Adhar? And then for the completeness sake, I just included this table that Brahmagyan is eventually what the aim is, not to understand this presentation, which went into a detail, but it was a presentation to show that this Jagat is mithya. And there is a whole logic. There are lots of lectures behind it. I tried to just, cover it in brief here. But if we are not able to see that Brahm is the only reality, whatever is the problem, there's a solution and a method to it. So this was all. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Fantastic, Alpana. Thank you so much. So this is great. So Kishore, if you can remove the spotlight, maybe get everybody on the panel, then we can open it up for Q&A.
Hi, Alpana, Subbu here.
That was awesome. So
yeah,
just to make sure that we use the time effectively, please raise your digital hand so I can monitor who is raising first, and then we can shoot the arrows at Alpana and let us hear from her how she feels it. Go ahead, Subbu.
Hey, Alpana, first of all, wonderful. Thank you very much for introducing us to Vichar Sagar. Okay, I don't think I would have ever known that script existed, but I think today we have I wouldn't say, I think we've just got a glimpse of it. So I think, thank you very much for the introduction. I just had 1 or 2 reflections. I think the video that you shared on the 10th man, right? I think that also explains the 7 stages of spiritual life, right? I mean, the journey, right? I think it's a very good example to connote. So the moment you said 7 stages, it appeared to me there. And what is interesting is even SPJ breaks this down into 2 parts. The 1, 2, 3 has set number 1, where there is absolutely, in the state of ignorance, and 4, 5, 6, 7, where I think the process of self-inquiry starts, and one starts to understand this a little bit more. And what I liked best was Shok Nivarti and attaining bliss, the 6th and 7th. So he gives a very nice example. He says, Shok Nivarti is like, that the snake is holding on to the treasure which you're wanting. Yeah. Now you have managed to kill the snake. So you're actually relieved. So that aha moment that, you've actually managed to break in is Shok Nivarti. And, attaining bliss is like attaining the treasure. So I thought that metaphor was very nice. This is basically the SPJ lecture that you had forwarded sometime back on the 10th man. So otherwise, I think a lot to learn for me. And I think a lot of reflection. I think it requires also some amount of re-listening to whatever has been said. So thank you very much for this. Yeah.
Thank you, Subbu. So Alpana, a question for you. And this is a deliberate question, although I know the answer. So you said that the direct method is not necessarily proof that something exists. So does it contradict what scientific methods are?
See, if everything is adhyas, it's explaining causation within the adhyas. So when the adhyas is projecting, actually this adhyas is a precursor to drishti srishtivad. So everything is projected. So when it's all projected, even the causation is projected. And science is trying to understand the causation. So in a way, it negates that, but the adhyas is very logical. So the other way to see it is that, yes, there is causation in the adhyas. It doesn't happen randomly. Otherwise, we would suddenly see something and then suddenly we would be somewhere else and living I think it reminds me of Inception. Yeah, you'll be somewhere and then suddenly you'll go somewhere else and somewhere else. It'll be chaos. So there is in that projection, there is causation, and science is best to explain that. And so in the transactional level, yes, it's not negating science, but what it is trying to explain is what's beyond science. Where science ends is where this starts.
Thank you, Alpana. Mukul?
Hey, Alpana, thank you. I mean, just listening to it, I'm just amazed at the levels of analysis how rishis have gone, right? Just amazes me the levels of categorization and, so simple, we just say it's a projection, but they've gone to 6 levels of just amazed me. Thank you for introducing this book and loved it. It is just an eye-opener to see, how much time rishis have spent on this subject and how much, what levels have they gone to contemplate and what are it's just such a complete analysis. Thank you for exposing us to this. Really loved it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mukul. And I think I'm so fascinated that some of the theories we discard as being very trivial, they're actually not trivial, because it goes into the detail why they, like one of the, I'll give you just a small example. So one of the khyati is anyatha khyati. Anyatha khyati means that what you're seeing here, the snake, actually that snake exists somewhere. So say in zoo. So it appears very, very, it's hilarious. How can the snake existing in zoo, you are seeing it here in the, but the anyatha khyati is also accepted by Advaitins, but we say when it is in the proximity. So the example of prism and a red flower kept behind it, you see the red prism because of the proximity. So that is nothing but anyatha khyati. So I think when we try to say that all these philosophies are useless, they are well thought through. It's just when somebody is trying to disprove them, they take an example which sounds very, very trivial, and that how can you even think about it? But it's amazing that it goes through all of them, and not just the Astik Darshan, but also Vaisheshik, Buddhist, Jainism. So it gives a fair amount of idea about what these philosophies are in. And then refuting them.
And what amazes is that, like the society where people, like people are today struggling. I mean, the whole idea is to pay bills, right? That's like 99% of the mentality, right? But there was a society which had the luxury where people were just doing this, right? And that's like just kind of that just boggles my mind, right? I mean, there's a group of people who just were doing research and who were just thinking about this pretty much, and then I mean that's a huge luxury. I think that this just amazes me just to even think of that, the depth they've gone and time they spent on this.
Thank you, Mukul. Sakuba, your birthday question, please.
Yeah, so no, so I need to listen to this probably a couple of more times to understand it better. But if you in slide number 11, Alpana, you talked about Tula Vidya and Mula Vidya. So and you explained that in the context of the snake and the rope example, which we have heard. I mean that's an example that is quoted everywhere. So I want to understand this better with respect to another example. Like, for example, if I have a fear that some unfortunate event is going to happen and which has not happened yet, but I have a fear of that. So if you have to explain this with respect to Tula Vidya and Mula Vidya, and how does, I mean, what is blocking there? If you can explain that.
So in that particular case, actually, it is our vasanas which are playing. So it is completely Sakshigyan. So Sakshigyan doesn't involve Tula Vidya, first of all. It is just the Mula Vidya. So Mula Vidya is the one because of which the world has been projected. And because of our impressions and our fears, which are in our mind, they come to the forefront. And there's a logic going on. So it is Sankalp Vikalp, which is going on within the mind. And they're directly visible through the Sakshi Gyan itself. So there's nothing happening outside, but it is more of that. So that's one part of it. The second part is, okay, now within the, if you forget about the adhyas and you are in this transactional world, all the subtle bodies put together is known as Hiranyagarbha, which is the cosmic subtle body. So in a way, you can think of our subtle body as part of that. But it is all connected. So sometimes we also have premonitions where we can directly tap into that cosmic, where in that cosmic Hiranyagarbha, where, see, whatever happens on the physical plane actually starts happening in the subtle body much earlier. So if you can tap into that, because it is anyway connected, and there's a huge possibility. That's why you can have visions, you can have, premonitions, that when you can tap into that. So that's the other explanation in the entire adhyas, but within the adhyas part of it, yes. But that's why there is causation, there is karma theory, there is this thing, but within this.
So is that the reason why they say that, you send, think positive and send positive vibrations, correct, and so on? So that.
Correct. It influences. It starts the change at the subtle level, but it may take time to materialize. That's why we don't see and we can't prove the correlation immediately. Sometimes it can take, it depends also in the intensity of with what intensity you send. It also depends on the intensity of the prarabdha. It also depends on the intensity of the other person, how receptive they are. So that's why that equation is just so complicated, and to understand how to balance various vectors.
Thank you.
And Alpana, just a follow-on question to what Sakuba asked. Does it mean that, is it a possibility that you don't have to send positive thoughts or negative thoughts to the universe to make these premonitions happen? You can just be blank and nothing will happen.
Oh, sorry?
And nothing will happen. Assume that your mind is blank completely. One's mind is completely blank.
So nothing will happen to whom?
Nothing will, none of these premonitions or fears that we project, if the mind is kept blank out of that, not necessarily even the positive, then neither positive nor negative are likely to happen. Is that a fair understanding?
No, so premonition can be actually of things that are going to happen. So they've been set in motion in the subtle world. So premonition is not just projecting it. It is tapping into what's actually coming.
Okay.
So both ways. But what you're saying is right. If you're not projecting anything, you're not fueling anything. So you're not giving any more energy to it. Yes.
Got it.
But it has set into motion because of prarabdha, a lot of things, they will happen.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Guns.
Hey, sorry. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. Okay. Hey, Alpana, I just want to echo what the others were saying. There's so much of learning here. I am just moving to a quieter place. Just 1 second. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, there's so much of learning here. I've never thought of so many different concepts coming together like this. And I just wanted to refer to our many discussions from last couple of days in the mothership group. Um, and the thing is, you know, there were some questions that came up there, which I found interesting, which I think you have actually beautifully answered here. So I was almost thinking that you might chime in there when those questions came up. And one of the things was this, what Guntax just asked, right, about scientific knowledge. And then you said there is causality happening even within that projection. That I think beautifully explained, you explained that, because somebody said, none of this thing is real. So what the hell does that mean? Kind of challenge was put forth, and we were trying to answer that. But so I actually go back to the same question. When you say causation is occurring even within the projection, which is, let's call it Maya, whatever we want to call it, right? Is that what you actually meant? So science, as what we call or define as science, that is what we do. We study within that boundary of the projected universe or whatever, the material universe. That's what you meant, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Having said that, I may add, but then you think about a dream, and think of a dream through the eyes of the dream person, not the dreamer. See, the dreamer, when wakes up, we look at it very differently.
Yeah.
But think of dream as the dream person within the dream.
Yeah.
Dream looks exactly like this. But now think of it, when the dream started, say you were going somewhere, and then you suddenly meet your grandfather. So technically, if you look at the timeline, the grandfather has come after you, but the dream has projected the causality also. And that's what I was trying to say, that even causality, which we are studying as part of science, is also projected.
Correct. Yeah. That is beautiful. I think this is the answer that everybody is looking for. And you know, the beauty of this is this discussion, Guntax and I have spoken so many times about it. This discussion is actually bothering everyone. Not discussion. This question or this kind of thought, right, is bothering everyone, which is why it keeps coming back in our discussion group. Now the frequency has actually gone up. It is almost like frequency intensity recovery that Swami P keeps talking about. The frequency has gone up. If you notice, like, it used to come up once in 6 months. Now every month there is one full circle, and then the same question keeps coming up. And every time Guntax goes, I was telling him, hey, you are going to get attacked, and then there will be like 5 people attacking this concept. But I think your answer is very, to me, it is very convincing. Okay. For a lot of people, the question still remains, oh, then should I jump? If you tell me to jump, I will jump and nothing will happen to me because I am in the projection. But you are in the projection. So something will happen to you because we are obeying those scientific laws. So I think that's a very beautiful explanation. Thank you.
Thank you, Gunts.
Thanks, Gunts. The way that you said it, to me, it's convincing. That is really nice. Thank you for that. Kishore, over to you.
Right. Alpana, thank you so much. This was very enlightening. And to echo Mukundan's point, it's like mind-boggling to see this level of analysis from, I don't know, 5,000, 6,000 years ago. It's just amazing. A question, actually, this was somebody else asking this question recently, and I thought I'll put it out here in this context because I couldn't answer it very clearly. The question is, who suffers? Okay. So, there was a an assumption associated with this question, or a statement along with it, which is it cannot be the mind because mind is insentient, and it cannot be the Atma because Atma shouldn't be suffering. So then who suffers is the question. So I thought I'll ask it here in this context. So over to you.
So even the suffering is projected.
Okay, yeah.
So that's why I think, I mean, it's very simple to answer any question if you.
I know, but then
But then you have
so
to
then
believe
suffering...
in the projection. So no, you're right, and it is the exact question that the Uttam Adhikari asked. Then who suffers? I feel suffering, and exactly put it in the same way, that the mind is insentient, and Atma doesn't change. It cannot be the Karta or Bhokta. Then who is it suffering? So one answer given is Chidabhas.
Mm-hmm.
The reflected consciousness is the one who experiences it all, which is, but what is Chidabhas again then, right? It's on Agyan. It's reflected on Agyan. Agyan is ignorance.
Can Chidabhas reflect? I thought Chidabhas reflects on the sattvic aspect of the mind, right?
Agyan is sattvic because Agyan is also knowledge. It is also knowledge in a different way. Knowledge of ignorance is Agyan. So it is also completely sattvic, and that is where the consciousness reflects on, and that's the one which is experiences. Because you're right, we tend to take, and that's why I was trying to spend a little bit time on Ahankar came after Agyan. So Ahankar can't be the one who's ignorant. So it is the same, and it is insentient. It is like the mind, you said, is insentient. It cannot be feeling it. But this is the job of I. So actually, I don't know whether I covered that part. So in that Ahankar slide, if you notice, there are two ashraya of ignorance. So one is in the consciousness. So consciousness is the locus of the main ignorance, the Mula Vidya, the cosmic one, okay? And after that, Ahankar is made or created or projected, yeah, through the Ahankar, through this Srishti Chakra also. Now this Ahankar, what it does is it claims the ignorant, the self-ignorance. It claims and it says, I am ignorant. Okay. So that actually takes away, because this Ahankar has this faculty of just claiming everything to be its, so me and mine, or different from mine, right? So, but then anything related to the body and mind, it just says it is I. I am the one who doesn't know. I don't know. I am suffering. Whereas the suffering is actually nowhere, but it has just claimed it. It's the claiming business that it does. Ahamkar, I making factory, which makes all of these things. I am the body, I am the mind, I am suffering, I am ignorant. Whereas it is insentient. It can't do anything, but it can do it with the help of the reflected consciousness. Consciousness can't do anything. It doesn't have any instruments. It doesn't have any current.
Because of the closeness of Ahankar to...
Correct. So correct. And that's where, again, that Anyatha Khyati comes, which we laugh over, that how can the snake sitting in the zoo appear in the rope here? We laugh over it, but that's exactly the Anyatha Khyati, because of which, but when it's in proximity.
Yeah.
And Anyatha Khyati is the one because of which it takes the sentiency, the consciousness from Atman, and claims it, it's me, I am sentient, I exist.
Yeah. Good answer. Thank you.
Mukul?
So one question actually, Sakuba triggered this. See the reality, right? There is this drishti vada, which means that the reality exists and I am perceiving it. The second one is it's first created in me and then it's projected, right? The reality as we experience, whether the person is in the jnana or whether he's established in jnana, there is an experienced reality when the person is waking up, right? So in this context of the scripture, what's your kind of take on that, right? Because first all of us experience the realities existing, and this, as we go through the journey, you understand your Brahman, right? That means the reality is projected from you. So in this scripture, how does that kind of
it is
transition happen?
So first the drishti comes, first the consciousness is there, and hence the creation follows. Only when you see the object exist. Go to deep sleep, nothing exists. And when you wake up, it is projected again. So it's same again in the dream. So when within a dream, if you go to sleep, the dream person goes to sleep. When the dream person wakes up, it again wakes up at the same place where it went to sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all projection. So it is the drishti, because the mind exists first, and then srishti, it's projecting.
Understood.
Otherwise, srishti drishtivad, that first there was a srishti, and somehow from the matter, the consciousness got generated, and that started experiencing what already existed. That's the other philosophy. Srishti drishtivad. So srishti came first. Drishti represents awareness, experiencing, seeing, etc. So that came later. So that's the other end of it. But we all believe in drishti srishtivad, and then the third one is ajatvad. Nothing is ever created. So
Understood.
ajatvad and drishti srishtivad are very, very close.
And in the 6 levels of seeking, right? The 6 levels.
Yeah.
Because the first level is always you believe the world has been created, right? That's a perception, right?
Correct. Correct.
I have no control on that, right? Is there a correlation where that starts shifting? This idea starts shifting as a person goes through a journey.
Third one, paroksha gyan. When you hear about it, it begins to shift, and in aparoksha gyan, it shifts fully.
Okay. Thank you.
So paroksha gyan is when you've heard about it, then you think, okay, maybe it is like that. When you hear it from authoritative sources. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Understood.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So my turn, I'll go. I'll keep it very short. So, I mean, I've never dreamt in my dream and that I was sleeping and then I woke up. I should figure that thing out when next time. But a question for you. The mind has to, this was very mind-blowing for me. The mind, you said in one of your slides, I don't remember which one, mind has to take the Brahmakara Vritti for it to experience that aparoksha jnanam. Okay. Now, in normal course of our life, what vritti the mind takes? Okay, let me qualify. Is it taking the vritti of what we are seeing as this universe experiencing? Is that what we're taking?
All of that. So what we are seeing, thoughts, emotions, ideas, memories.
Okay.
Everything is a modification of mind till you are in a nirvikalpa samadhi state.
Okay.
Chitta vritti nirodh. Unless you have that, you are having some thought or the other.
Got it. Krishna, over to you.
Thank you so much, Alpana. It's a brilliant presentation, so many levels. So I just want to ask a kind of leading question that we see discussed again. Would love your answer as well. So there is Atman and everything. There is just only one Advaitam. But then there is this Maya and Avidya also seems to be Anadi and seems to come out from it that makes the projection happen. Please explain away.
So there are 6 things which are Anadi. So first is Brahman, and Brahman is Swarup se Anadi. It is It is the only one which is really Anadi and Anant. Now, the second is Maya. Maya is Agyan. So same example which Swami SPG takes. I don't know Chinese. Since when I don't know Chinese? Since birth. Okay, so you knew it before birth? No. So that ignorance has been Anadi. So similarly, that Agyan is Anadi. The third thing is the sambandh between that Maya and Brahm. The relationship between them is Anadi. So that tadatmya sambandh, that proximity, that anyatha khyati, because of closeness of it, they both have superimposed their gunas. So Maya appears to be sentient, it appears to be existing, and the Atman appears to be karta, bhokta, which it is not. So they both have interchanged their attributes. So these three things, Brahm, Maya, and the relationship between the two. Then Jeev, Ishwar, and the difference between the two of them. So Ishwar is also Anadi. And then Jeev is also Anadi. So Ishwar doesn't create Jeev. When we say Ishwar creates the Srishti in this creation, it may give the body to the Jeev. What we mean by the Jeev is the Karan Sharir, that seed state. But Ishwar alone cannot give body to the Jeev because it loses the causality. So, and causality is the karmas. And then the difference between the two. Right, it has always been there that as a Jeev, we think we are Alpagya, Ishwar is Sarvagya. All the omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient, all of those qualities. Okay, so all these six things are Anadi. They've always been existing. But they all started with Agyan, right? Because everything is the projection from Agyan. So when you have Gyan, Gyan will negate Agyan. See, Brahm and Agyan can coexist. They are not negating each other. That's why they all exist. But it is only the Gyan which negates the Agyan. So the five remaining ones, except from Brahm, they all are not Anant. उनका अंत हो जाता है और उनका बाद हो जाता है. बाद is उनका मिथ्यात्व निश्चय हो जाता है. You can negate them by saying that they don't have independent existence. Because what we noticed was Agyan is located in Brahman and the Agyan is about Brahman. So both of those things are nothing but Brahman. So the rest of the things, they are Anadi because ignorance doesn't have a beginning. You cannot suddenly say that I became ignorant of something starting now. That means, did you know it before that? No, it is always Anadi. So these five things are also Anadi, but they have end. Only Brahma is Anadi and Anant. It doesn't have, that's why it's the Nitya, the second one we used for the Mangalacharan.
Brilliant as always. Thank you.
Subbu?
Yeah, Alpana, I just wanted to, hear you out again. You said somebody in the South actually translated this Vichara Sagar, right? Are you referring to Sadashiv Brahmendra or somebody else?
Swami Vasudev Brahmendra Saraswati.
Vasudeva Brahmendra Saraswati. Okay, all right. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
And his translation is beautiful in very simple Sanskrit. So if you know a little bit Sanskrit, you can read through it and you will be able to make sense of it, and very beautifully translated. So Swami P actually uses Sanskrit version, and he says, so I'm glad that somebody translated it into Sanskrit, because Hindi is also not the Hindi that we use. It's Awadhi Hindi. Okay. So it's harder to understand.
All right, thank you. Yeah.
Vidya?
Hey, Alpana, thank you for such a beautiful presentation and explanation, which is very deep. A lot to learn, like how everyone said. The question I had is, when you were talking about Paroksha Gyan and Aparoksha Gyan, is it possible that one doesn't have to go through the Paroksha Gyan at all?
I mean, there are yes, direct ones. If in the 10th man story, if the person just came and said, you are the 10th person, there wouldn't have been Aparoksha Gyan. Aparoksha Gyan in that story happens when he says, don't worry, the 10th person exists. So that was the Paroksha Gyan. If the person comes and says, why are you crying? You are the 10th person, just count. Then that would have been directly the Aparoksha Gyan. So that's more from, yes, you can have direct knowledge without having indirect knowledge. You don't need to say that, oh, Jumri Talaya exists, and then you go. You go there and you ask, what place is this? The person will tell you the name and you will have the direct knowledge. So it's not necessary that you may have that. Having said that, for this knowledge that Brahman exists, I think you need to have Paroksha knowledge, because it's very hard to directly know that you are Brahman, because somebody comes and says, Tattvamasi. Unless you understand it and go through that process, it's very hard to have that. And cases where it has happened in the past, in our Puranas, etc., they always say that they had done enough work and had learned it in their previous janma. So that's why I am not sure whether direct knowledge is possible. You may need to have the Paroksha Gyan.
Thank you, Alpana. I know that was a one-off question, but I think that was a great explanation. Like looking back at, Ashtavakra and those kind of stories that we have heard, and they must have done so many janmas taken, and all what we are trying to do now, trying to do in this janma, they must have done many years ago. But I still had that. Is it possible that, a jiva is not taking many janmas, but just one janma or just minute one and complete it? I was just wondering about that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vidya. So it's 7:38. We started this session with Vichar Sagar, and finally Vidya shined the light on us, and hopefully all of us have got the Vidya. Thank you so much, Alpana, for this great session, and really loved it. And maybe, if you can please also conclude with a concluding prayer, that'll be wonderful.
Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hari Om Tat Sat. Hari Om Tat Sat.
Thank you, Alpana. It was an awesome session.
Thank you. Next week,
Thank you.
we'll
Thank you
revise
for listening
chapter 7.
to my blabbering. Thank
Wonderful,
you.
Alpana. It was wonderful.
Oh, it was not blabbering at all.
Thank you. It was great.